This is a response to Onikuno, and he was asking about would you want to change in college football that's not related to the BCS or the playoffs system. I have a video on playoffs. I'll have a link to the sidebar. But what I want to change would be the scheduling for college football. I would want none of this scheduling in a football championship series or FCS opponent, which is like your Division II. I don't want any team scheduling that unless you're a mid-major. I do not want a Big Six school, which is, of course, the big conferences. I don't want them scheduling any Division II schools, because to me that's a cheap win. Well, it's not really cheap, but I know they pay a six-digit figure or $1 million to the school that travels out there to lose. I think it's wrong, and I think it's just a cheap way of getting a win when it doesn't count. So that's probably the biggest change. Now let's look at how it's impacted the some bowl games. Some of these teams that, because they got the cupcake game, they're going bowling. Some of these mid-majors I'll be a little lenient on, but Wyoming had a cupcake. Some other 6-6 teams that had Army did have a what you can say, an FCS opponent. Army scheduled VMI at one point, so that's why they're 5-6 right now. Going down the line, big ones I'm picking on is Minnesota, because Minnesota struggled against South Dakota State this season. They almost lost, and Minnesota's going bowling, which is pretty pathetic, I find, for a big school. They didn't even have a good season, really. This was mediocre, rather. They couldn't win the big games. They beat Michigan State. They beat Purdue. They did beat Northwestern, I'll give them that, but down the stretch, they were just losing games here and there. So Minnesota somehow gets away to a bowl game. Iowa State does. They played South Dakota State, I believe. Well, maybe they did North Dakota State, sorry. But I'll give Iowa State some grace or benefit just because they haven't gone to a bowl game in a while, and they beat Nebraska in Lincoln, so I'll give them that. Also, some other schools to pick on is Florida State. Florida State went 6-6 this year. Should have had a losing season, but they played Jacksonville State, and they struggled against them. They won 19-9 during the season, and it's once again mediocrity. I don't think some of these mediocre teams that went 6-6 should go bowling. Also, Michigan State was the other 6-6 team that had a cupcake that squeaked through. So yeah, Minnesota, Iowa State. Well, I'll be nice to Iowa State, but Minnesota, Florida State, and Michigan State are the three schools I think that shouldn't be going bowling because they went 5-6. If you take away that cupcake opponent. Of course, it's pretty also lame how Kansas State almost went bowling. If they got that 7th win, they scheduled 2 FCS opponents, so they technically could have gone 5-5 if you remove those 2 wins. Obviously, the good news is they're not going bowling because of the rule you have to have 7 wins when you schedule 2 FCS opponents. I just don't like the rule of scheduling like that. It's a real cheap way to avoid a loss. Notice that Alabama scheduled Chattanooga late in the season. We didn't have to. If you want to do these early games, do it when you're early in the season. These cupcakes. Don't schedule a cheap opponent late in the season. Because Florida scheduled the Citadel last year, and of course they played Charleston Southern. I just really don't agree with this Division II scheduling and paying for a win. UCLA had 3 legitimate non-conference games this year. They're 6-6, and the fate's not even in their hands. It's up to Navy, because they beat Tennessee, Kansas State, and San Diego State. San Diego State might be a cupcake, but it's a mid-major, and they played 2 BCS or Big Six related schools in Kansas State and Tennessee. So it was legit. I can say my program has never faced an FCS opponent. They never have in their team history, and probably will not for a while. So that's probably the biggest thing I'd want to change in college football. And also, I'd want any of the big schools to schedule 2 other big schools in non-conference play. So obviously my Bruins did that. They scheduled 2. I think every school should be able to, because Texas took an easy schedule. They scheduled 4 mid-majors, I believe, on their schedule. So it's pretty phony to me. The Big 12 has been a little phony because they scheduled 37 mid-majors or FCS opponents with their non-conference schedule. 37 out of the 48 games were not against the bigger opponents. And I can break down the ACC does it, the SEC does it, but the Pac-10 probably does it the least. And they've been really good about, at least some schools will do it, but it's not as serious as the bigger schools. And that's how the SEC and Big 12 get a little overrated because of their scheduling. So that's my point. Hope you enjoyed reading, and congrats to Kai Forbath and Toby Gerhart for winning their respective awards. Toby Gerhart won the Doak Walker Award for Best Running Back, and Kai Forbath got the Kicker Award, beating Blair Walsh and the Tiffin. So congrats to those two. Toby Gerhart for Heisman, and I'll see y'all later. Bye-bye.